Pulp Fiction, Jurassic Park, Fight Club. The 90s, like many remember, is home to some of the most memorable films of our era, both good and bad. The 90s held more than just some of these small gems in filmmaking. That also housed many other pop culture elements that are iconic to this decade. I will present findings about the pop culture of the 90s through my interview with my father, Rob Parsons. In this speech, I will discuss the pop culture of the 1990s experienced by Rob Parsons, including many main pop culture elements and trends of the 90s, as well as some of the major differences between today and this decade, and many similarities between them. Like many people that I've talked to, Rob Parsons watched many of the shows that this decade found popular, such as Seinfeld and Frasier on television. He also listened to much of the grunge music era with Alice in Chains, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and the likes. But his main focus in music was the alternative scene and all that. One thing he did mention, which was a big thing in the 90s, was the internet and how that changed households from across America, and how you could just unplug your phone cable, plug it into your computer, and just send emails right back and forth to whoever, your friends, family, and the likes. He remembers doing that when it first came out for work emails and all that, and how it was such a huge innovation for that time. He also mentioned that with computers, it changed how his work incorporated many elements. It changed how they presented projects, how they did business, and many other aspects in his office, as he was already in his late 20s by the 90s or so. One of the biggest differences I've noticed between our era and this past decade, is how the use of computers and multimedia have become much larger in today's era instead of back then. Back then, computers were rare, required the phone cable in order to run just basic email. And then if someone needed to make a phone call, you had to unplug the computers and all that just so someone could make one phone call. You know, nowadays, everybody has that technology. It's not brand new, it's not groundbreaking or innovative. Kids have smartphones, they know how to use a computer. Some know how to use a computer better than me. And I thought I was tech savvy. But unlike kids in the 90s, where most of them spent most of their time outside, it just seems like there's been a huge change between physical playing to more of an multimedia, digital technology playing and education, and how that's getting incorporated in the classrooms too. It's just such a huge part of our world now that it just wasn't back then. So many of the similarities between now and then is how I still know people talking about shows that happened in the 90s and how that happened and all that. But the music is, I would say, the biggest similarity that I've noticed, is that alternative music today is very similar to alternative music from the 90s. And it's amazing how those kind of music groups back then had a lasting impact in today's world, music industry, all that. So then, in conclusion, after interviewing Rob, I can confirm that most of the trends in the 90s did happen, but he did not participate in many of them, as he had a job, family, kids. And since he only participated in a few, he can only give me so much information about the rest of the decade, with politics, the government, and all that. So those are my findings upon interviewing Mr. Rob Parsons. And thank you for listening. Bye-bye.